Hello and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security, talking about news. We have a cast of characters here to talk about the CrowdStrike thing. But before we get started, I just want to point out, you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Take deep breaths. Unless you're in an airport, then you're screwed. Or if you're running Bitdefender. If you're running Bitdefender, I saw somebody recommend on Twitter, it's time to just like walk out of the office and give up at that point. But other than those things, it's going to be okay, we think, most likely. So today we wanted to put this together because ambulance chasing is fun. We wanted to put together a bunch of people that kind of understand what's going on so we could talk about it, but also commiserate. If you're on Discord, I want to see those memes, folks. Like, what are some of the best memes you're seeing from this CrowdStrike thing? This is cathartic. It helps us get through these things. If I come across as flippant and I'm joking and all of that, I'm not doing that to make light of anybody that's dealing with this situation and really struggling today. I'm doing it because we're trying to use this as laughter as the best medicine, and we're laughing hopefully with you. We're not laughing at anybody. I also want to make it very clear that also goes for the engineers at CrowdStrike. It's fun to make memes. It's fun to make jokes every once in a while, but I want you to understand on the onset before we get started on this, software dev for very large software projects is incredibly difficult. Kernel dev is even more difficult. So please have a heart for the engineers. As far as the salespeople that are trying to capitalize on this, don't give them no quarter at all. But honestly, we really want to make sure that everyone understands this comes from a place of love. We're joking about it. We're trying to get through it. And it's kind of a little bit of gallows humor. I have Joff on to help talk about kernel stuff and what's going on. Patterson Cake is here, runs our IR practice at BHIS. How many reboots is your son up to now?
We're at 18 and counting.
We're at 18 and counting. One of the solutions was to keep rebooting the system 15 times, and then magically the network stack would come up, get an update from CrowdStrike. His son is doing that for us. He's on 18. Now, Patterson, anytime we get into a lull in this, it kind of gets into that, just shout out how many reboots were out. We just need to know, because I was worried that was just a lot of like hot air, but we're going to find out. 19 and counting. Also got John Hammond. If there's anybody that knows malware, knows antivirus, knows what's going on, except for today, we're all like, what the hell? So I called up John and I'm like, dude, what the hell's going on? He's like, I don't know. I haven't slept much, man. It's just really, really super busy, but we're really happy that John is here to help us talk about it. Matt is also on, who, by the way, Matt works for Black Hills Information Security, by the way.
I learned this today.
He is a full-time employee of Black Hills Information Security, much to the shock and surprise to other people at Black Hills Information Security. But he also is like bypass, exploit, kernel level stuff at BHIS. Derek's been around for a long time at BHIS. I think he's like employee number 6 or 7. And he just keeps showing up to these things. But he also is the lead on our SOC services. So we want to bring him in on this. And then we've got Jason, who you all know. Jason is just like here to kind of, when we get too technical, drop in questions, bring in hot takes, funny little jokes and little jabs. And behind the scenes, we have Ryan. And can everyone send Ryan your love, because he has COVID? He should not even be here. His boss is an asshole for making him come to work today. And he put this all together for us. So a round of applause for Ryan for making this happen. We really, really appreciate you, Ryan. He makes us look good and sound good, even whenever he doesn't feel like doing it. So, John, you've got to jump off because you've got a very, very, very busy day. I first learned about this on Twitter. I jumped on, and I saw a tweet from you early this morning about, you're like, hey, there appears to be some weird things happening. And I noticed it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and that tweet was 3 or 4 hours old. I was like, what the hell? So you've been working on this quite a bit. You're probably going to have one hell of a day. You want to give us kind of a rundown of when you first started hearing about it? Because you're one of the first people in the industry that I know of that was kind of like throwing the alarm bell. To kind of give us a little bit of timeline from your perspective about what's happened here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, hey, I'll admit I'm over in the Pacific time, kicking it over in California. So it was like 10 or 11:30-ish, and I was thinking like, oh, goodness, we got to get a video out tomorrow for some other thing that I wanted to do. But then I saw this fire start to burn on the subreddit Crowdstrike subreddit, and folks kind of starting to flag it. And I really had the hunch this is going to absolutely implode.
Now, were you seeing some of the earliest stuff that I saw appeared to start in Australia and New Zealand? Is that kind of where you started seeing it pop up there?
I know due to the time zone, those folks are awake and still tracking things during the day. I'll admit, I think the earliest I saw was 9:57 p.m. Pacific, and that was just the starting gun on the Crowdstrike subreddit. But I believe everyone chiming in and all the comments and responses just said, "Hey, yeah, we're already down and have been fighting fires here in Australia, New Zealand, whatever, etc."
Mm-hmm.
And then U.S. and I think the rest of the world started to wake up to it slowly but surely. What else can I color the picture on here for?
So whenever you first started seeing this pop up, what was the first thing? I mean, we know that there was something. I mean, it seemed to me like we knew very early on it was Microsoft and CrowdStrike together. That's what the issue was, right? But it took a little while to figure out exactly what was the sys driver. Like, how long did that kind of take from, hey, everything is on fire, here's possibly what it's causing it to be on fire? Was that like an hour, 2 hours? How long do you think that time window was between oopsies to here's what we've got to do to deal with it?
It's actually pretty neat. I think you can see, and I'm trying to see if I can track it down in the Reddit post just as well. There was, I think, about a 20-minute delta from when, some sales engineer or representative from CrowdStrike said, hey, we're aware, we're seeing widespread reports of blue screen of death, et cetera, et cetera. We'll try to get a tech alert or whatever they call their advisories and messaging and knowledge-based stuff. So that was a 20-minute delta. And then about 15 minutes following, the technical alert came out. And then around that time, I would say 40 to 50 minutes, maybe an hour, is when they've identified, hey, we are seeing this CS agent.sys kernel driver being problematic. It looks like, and I'm not super 1,000% confident on whether it's loading some of these C-00291 whatever drivers.
Files.
Yeah. But those are the hiccups. Those are the issues. So you've got folks trying to share some quick, scrappy workarounds and mitigations of, hey, just rename the folder path, rename it so that way it won't load the driver. Bear in mind that will completely cripple CrowdStrike, so your mileage may vary with that. I was kind of going back and forth, screaming and shouting on Twitter when I saw Brody from, I think, the director of Overwatch at CrowdStrike's crew saying, like, look, here's a little bit more pointed, a little bit more targeted. Make sure you can get into safe mode and use the commands to remove the C29001 sys suffix kernel files and drivers. And that was much sharper and much more accurate than just rename the folder path. And
because it doesn't completely break CrowdStrike at that point, right? So
I don't want to, ramble for too long. So if I'm yapping, please.
No, please. No.
But obviously, I think a lot of folks will raise their hand and say, hang on, wait a second. You really want me to do that manually across however many 50,000 endpoints? Yes, that is the crux of the issue. And you can expand that and extend that to whatever scale and size you might like. And folks are saying, like, well, wait a second. That only works if you aren't using Bitlocker encryption. It's kind of harder to do that at scale because, you'd need the Bitlocker recovery key to be able to get into that safe mode.
Dude, on Reddit, I'm hearing like systems administrators that are straight up like, yeah, I need to get the recovery keys. It's on my notebook computer, which is blue screened, and I don't have the recovery keys for that system. Like, it's bad. I was joking about the whole Bitlocker thing, but this is one of those situations where our security products are getting in the way of our security products at this point.
It's not just Bitlocker. It's probably any disk encryption.
It is any disk encryption, right? God, just watching Discord explode with the memes. Keep them going. Keep them going. I don't know.
Memes.
I just saw the Steve Kornacki meme pop up, and I never thought I'd see a Steve Kornacki meme in an IT security webcast, but here we are in Kornacki khakis.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to stop. I'd love to have all of your hot take and your expert opinion, because I know there's been some chatter where folks are saying, hey, you can use group policy to push out some automated tasking and then force the safe mode configuration change, blah, blah, blah. And that is I think what some folks are saying, might be some alleviation to this headache.
But wait
But-
wait a minute now.
How
But
does that-
if we look at this, you can't even boot. Like
Right.
the network stack isn't coming up.
Right.
So group policy, I don't know unless there's some kind of new thing that's out there. And like you said, if you're on Discord with us, if you have a link about that, that would be great. But apparently one of the things they said is reboot the system 15 times. The network stack will come back up. Crowdstrike can reach out and pull down an update that nukes this file and solves the issue. We're testing that now. Patterson, what are we at for reboots?
I fear at 18 or 19, my volunteer staff quit
Gave
on me. Yeah, my volunteer staff is directly struggling with this issue in the enterprise, and so in all seriousness, they were
enough time
testing
on
this as a potential solution, and it's just a non-starter. I've seen reports that it's worked for some folk. I have two direct contacts in two significant enterprises, and both have failed to see any resolution, literally up to 18, 19 reboots on a handful of systems. Your mileage may vary, but that is pretty clearly not a silver bullet at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, that test of two systems that were going on, not looking good.
Yeah.
George just pointed out, let's go to 50. Let's see what that does. Maybe that'll do it.
You never know. You never know.
You never know.
Once you get to the 100, it starts working, I hear.
Yeah.
A quick question for everyone here. Like it used to be infosec Twitter was the place to go and find answers and solutions. Like, is there a centralized place right now where people are
I still went to Twitter and Reddit. Those are the two places that I'm at. This might get me back on the Twitters because that's where I'm getting probably the best information and the best communication with some of the top people on this. And I don't know what you all think, but it's Reddit and Twitter for me is where I'm getting all of my information on that. And of course, the BHIS Discord server.
I would also add LinkedIn to this. I'm not one to usually promote LinkedIn for threat intel, but it's actually really surprising how much sharing has been done. Just trying to follow along. There's been a lot of sharing of code and reverse engineering, trying to figure it all out through LinkedIn. And so kudos to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo that too. Twitter and LinkedIn combination there. I tend to lean into Twitter first, and then lean on my friends like Matt. Who is an employee of BHIS, by the way, just for the record.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that Matt and I work very deeply with lots of malware development. So the minute we heard of this issue, we both were like, we know exactly what this is. My camera's mirrored apparently. Okay. Which is my best side? Is it this side or this side?
It's the side that has the hat on. You need the hat.
Yeah, I need the hat, right? I'm going to unmirror my camera.
So
whoa, that was scary.
Oh my God, that's nauseating.
So I saw a lot of people.
Can you give us a little bit of information? Like, okay, so we know that this file is a channel file, and I scrambled all over the internet trying to figure out what the hell a channel file. That's actually how I opened up my conversation with John and invited him on. And because the Crowdstrike people are saying, it's a channel file. It's not like a full update. So what I was able to find out from channel files from Mike Felch, You Stay Ready, who's over at Trusted, a good friend of BHIS, is this is a file for minor updates, definition updates, very, very small tactical updates. And the thing that I was kind of working off of and trying to figure out is this something that's generated through automated means, like, God help me for saying this, artificial intelligence and threat intel pushing updates down to systems, or is it manual? And he said, based on his information, which may be out of date by a couple of years, it was very much manual. It was a manual file for these updates that get pushed down for little quick tweaks. So it wasn't an automated thing. And then people started cracking this thing open and it was full of nulls. It was full of zeros. Now, can you and Matt talk a little bit about where does Crowdstrike exist as it relates to the kernel and what the hell is going on with a file full of nulls coming into it and how that impacts the kernel itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at these defensive products, modern day EDR, XDR, marketing acronym of choice, there are always, typically in well-developed products, layers of that product that operate in the kernel of the operating system and also operate in what we call the user land space, right? Kernel development, when you look at, so the channel file that we're actually talking about has an extension of .sys. In Windows land, that means it's a kernel driver, okay? Kernel driver development is a very specialized skill. It is a skill that you have to get exactly right, because when you're developing code in the kernel, there are no safeguards. You are responsible for managing all the memory allocations. You are responsible for managing all the resources and releasing them correctly. You are responsible for managing the memory space of the driver that you are developing and maintaining, and you are God at driver level. You can write to anything in the kernel and the user land space of the operating system that you want to write to. So it is a very high trust development environment. Okay, so if we go back historically for a minute, there was a time pre-Windows Vista where most antivirus products at that time used to put hooks into the kernel SSDT. It's a descriptor table that various kernel calls were using, and they would.
Was it the global interrupt descriptor table that they were hooking into? I
Yeah,
thought it was global, not the local.
You're right.
For each app. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it was global, and this Microsoft started getting upset with the community because if they made a mistake doing this, they would destabilize the kernel and result in what we're seeing today, right, which is a blue screen of death, otherwise known as a kernel crash, right? And so Microsoft, with the release of Vista, kicked the antivirus community at that time out of the kernel, and they introduced a technology called PatchGuard. PatchGuard basically said you can no longer directly patch the descriptor tables in the kernel. You're not allowed to, period. And if you do, we will bug check the system. In other words, we will crash the system, right? So naturally, the antivirus community at that time and the emerging, EDR, XDR community eventually, they were not too happy with that. And so what happened as we moved forward is these vendors started doing what's called user land hooking in their products. So they would patch in the user space, not the kernel space, the DLL in Windows that we all know and love as ntdll.dll, which means they were redirecting API calls in the Windows operating system so that they could get telemetry about what's going on in the system. At the same time, they were petitioning Microsoft, you've got to let us back into the kernel. We really, really don't like this situation of having to hook every process and do all this extra work in user land just because you won't let us tamper with the kernel. Eventually, and I don't know what actually transpired, of course, I'm not a Microsoft employee, but eventually Microsoft reneged and said, okay, we are going to give you some limited means for you to develop drivers in the kernel and listen to telemetry. And because that was their primary request. And the telemetry came in the form of what's called kernel callback notifications. And there's multiple different kernel callback notifications that are involved with kernel drivers. There are.
I want to jump in real quick on that history. There was a huge dust up between Symantec and McAfee at that time because they were the main antivirus vendors. And basically what they were planning on doing was just exploiting the Windows kernel to get the level of access that they needed. And before it actually got really ugly in the streets, because that was the threat, antitrust, we're just going to write exploits for it. Microsoft caved, and this is the kind of intermediary solution. So go ahead, keep going, Joff.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So these kernel callback notifications are in the form of a table in memory. And what happens is that when a driver installs itself and gets loaded, it will register a callback notification that driver wants to listen to. And basically, it's telling the Windows kernel, when certain events happen, tell me about that event. And there are names for these things. There is a process create notify routine, a create thread notify routine, a load image routine, a object register callback routine, as well as a registry activity routine. So the community was relatively happy that they got the telemetry back that they needed. But bear in mind, when you are developing drivers that listen to these callback notifications, the kernel is still vulnerable if that driver that it receives the notification does not do the right thing, essentially, and process that notification in a timely manner and allow the kernel to continue operating, right? Now, the worst of all possible scenarios, which we are experiencing right now, is if the kernel notification callback routine in the developed driver crashes or it is not able to be called, right? And from our understanding, the kernel notification callback that was registered by the Crowdstrike driver called out to make a notification and encountered a driver that had bad or missing code. And that immediately causes the Windows kernel to crash by design, because it's a destabilizing event. And so it's a mixture of things that are going on here, right? It's necessary for EDRs and XDRs to receive telemetry via these kernel callback notification registration events. But there's still a danger, and it's very critical that the driver is developed very carefully to process these events in a timely manner and to not destabilize the kernel, right? So this is going to be where the discussion is. And, you can go further than this to understand that this is not the only component of EDRs and XDRs. While they are receiving telemetry, those drivers are also interacting with the service process that's running in user LAN, typically, and providing that telemetry back to Crowdstrike, maybe getting some signature data, that kind of thing. That a lot more of the activity of defending is happening in user land. That kernel driver is typically acting mostly as a notification facility, right? So that's what we're seeing here. That's as near as I can understand what happened. Now, our information, and I think Matt can put up a slide on this, is that the kernel driver that was pushed with the update got installed, was in fact full of null characters, which means that the kernel notifications that immediately hit that driver would have hit essentially no code. And that absolutely would cause an immediate blue screen of death. And there has been some reverse engineering that has already occurred to actually support this. Matt, I wonder if you could put some of that up.
Yeah, Matt, can you share your screen and talk about your thing that you've done?
Yes, I actually just posted the pictures in our chat to be shared. Yeah. So if we go to the other picture for a second, you'll kind of see that there's already under the exception code an access violation, which is kind of what Joff was talking about. But to your point about the update being full of nulls, what we kind of see right here was this was caused because, as Joff mentioned, that kernel was expecting something. And by doing, I want to stress a little bit of research and a little bit of digging before this. It looks like it was expecting an actual Unicode structure of an address, and rather it got back this error code. And because of that, it crashed because obviously the update was full of nulls and didn't have any routines or functions. So that way it didn't return a valid result, causing this blue screen.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that, when you see an exception that is access violation in Windows, what that typically means is, and I see these all the time because I spend life in a debugger, what that typically means is that a register in the CPU has received an address with all zeros in it. It has tried to fetch memory at that address, and that is by definition an access violation because there is no address of 00000 or whatever, right?
And at this level, just to be clear, there is no structured exception handling. Like when you're working at this level,
the kernel,
there is no recovery. Like
there is no recovery at the kernel. There is no such thing as structured exception handling in the kernel. Right?
Yeah, it's just not a thing at all. So, go ahead.
Which is why Microsoft is so kind of always been cautious about letting third parties develop drivers, especially for this reason. When you see this a lot with, in the gaming industry, especially with graphic card drivers and stuff, one small thing crashes a computer, and all of a sudden, if your code is introducing that variance, all of a sudden you have a large player base that cannot play, and your game is dead in the water. But what I actually wanted to kind of show is that second picture now, which kind of led me down. There must be some kind of issue with it. If you see under fail bucket ID, this unknown function, because of that structure, it was supposed to jump to an address to continue on the code. But because it was full of zeros and it returned a null error, it actually changed and caused to jump to an unknown address. So far, this is what I've been able to pull out. And that's actually been part of the root cause of this crash.
Right. And so the only way to recover from a situation where you have a bad driver in the kernel that already has pre-existing callbacks in a running system, you've got to remember that the driver itself was written over, but the pre-existing callbacks were already in the callback tables. And so as soon as that first notification callback went to the new driver, immediate blue screen, right? The remedy is remove the bad driver, okay? So that Crowdstrike's user code then, once it boots up, presumably, I don't know this for a fact, but other Crowdstrike customers probably know this, the user level code would reach out for a new update. And as I understand it right now, Crowdstrike has the corrected, patched version of the driver, and you'll continue on your way, right?
So I want to ask you guys a little bit about load order, right? So it sounds like the majority of the Windows kernel fires up, but we're not getting network stacks going enough to be able to go to Crowdstrike to pull this off. We tried doing the 15 reboot trick, right? It seems to me like this is like where these drivers load is actually before the network stack.
Correct. It is. You will not get a stable kernel with this bad driver in place. I mean, in my opinion. Matt, go ahead.
Well, so obviously when we look at an EDR or when we think about it, they want to know what's going across the wire as well as what's going
as quickly as possible in that boot process, right?
So they're kind of putting themselves at a higher priority to be loaded first over the network stack. And that's kind of where this problem of, even if on a reboot, it's not getting the update is because by the time the network stack gets called, the Crowdstrike the Crowdstrike driver is already loaded and it crashes.
Right. And if it's a driver full of nulls, it'll crash as soon as it tries to load that driver. So I think
we've said it a lot, but I think the most interesting part of this whole takeaway is a driver update full of nulls.
That's what I keep coming back to. This doesn't seem like a developer screwed up and writing their code poorly. This almost feels like the file was corrupted or something
in there.
I've heard a lot of mixed things about people saying that it's AI generated. I don't believe that. I think
from what I'm hearing, it's not. From what I'm hearing, this is not a file that AI generates automatically. That's and like I said, the people, like if we're talking Mike or You Stay Ready on Twitter, Mike knows this stuff really well from a CrowdStrike perspective. He used to work there, did all kinds of research for BHIS. He's now at Trusted Sec. It's not AI generated, as near as I can tell.
No, but something in that QA process obviously went awry for this file to end up with nulls in it, right?
These things happen. I mean, I recently just upgraded my whole home infrastructure. I got the Dream Machine Pro, and when I plugged it in, had to do an update. The update corrupted the whole OS. I had to reflash the entire thing. It's not unheard of, but I just think there was some kind of missed security, safety check before it went live.
Yeah, we have a lot of people saying, well, someone effed up the code. I really don't think the code was effed up. I think it's the build process, the CI/CD pipeline somewhere between point A to point Z. Like I said, this doesn't look like hands-on keyboard oopsies. I used get s. It's like way more basic than that. Like it is definitely an oopsies, right? But it's not poor code development.
No one forgot a comma, so to speak.
So I gotta hand it over to John. John has to jump off. John, do you have anything else to add? Because by the way, I want to say thank you so much for giving 30 minutes of your time today. I know that you're going to be real busy. You've been up all night, and we appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that you got to say before you have to jump off, though?
Oh, goodness. Well, hey, I don't think so. Thank you so much for letting me be here with you all. It's kind of interesting to think on and speculate as to, okay, what were the root cause or what are these impacts and things as it's unfolding. At the end of the day, I think I would offer, just a gentle reminder that the other side across the screen, it's still another person. So big hug ups to Crowdstrike for fighting fires the best that they can, and everyone that is going to be doing this slowly in recovery and remediation efforts. You know what? It's still all of us in the same fight. So we'll be there together.
Also, I want to throw a shout out to Huntress for not taking advantage and like trying to do marketing and saying, look, Crowdstrike sucks. Because there are vendors that are doing that. And by the way, don't party with those people, right? We just don't want to party with those a-holes. So be sure to check it out. Also, I'd like to point out Huntress has a neighborhood watch program if you want to give things a try and play with it. And John is on YouTube, as all of you know, because you're probably all here because of him. So thank you so much, dude. Get out of here and get back to your day, and good luck and happy hunting.
Thanks all. See you soon.
All right. So
my question, at Black Hills?
Yeah, Jason's got some questions. Go ahead.
My question is, how do I explain this to regular people? What happened?
Honestly, I would just say it was a bad update that corrupted the operating system.
Yeah.
Antivirus works at a very low level in your computer. Antivirus screwed up, like something happened with it and it broke it. That's how I would try to describe it to friends and family, to be honest. I don't know if anybody else has a better analogy.
I think that's probably the easiest way to explain it. But what's I'm interested in following now is how exactly Microsoft's going to respond to the developer community and to all of the XDR, EDR, and defensive product community in terms of ideas for putting more guardrails around the kernel without pissing them off, right? I think it's going to get to be a very interesting conversation because, frankly, in a perfect world, this shouldn't be allowed to happen, right? And we'd rather not see an entire operating system destabilized by a single kernel driver. I also worry greatly in our community, and have for a long time actually, that the kernel driver supply chain is an extremely vulnerable and highly trusted part of everyday IT operations.
But that's literally because of the compromise that happened all the way back at Windows Vista, right?
Yeah.
You either let third-party vendors into the kernel or you let them out. And seriously, I think that Microsoft, as much as they were being, very, very, very monopolistic in trying to lock vendors out of the kernel, there were some damn valid reasons to keep them out of it as well.
Well, and those of us who lived through that period of time, we remember back in, Windows XP days, just how unstable the kernel would get when you lay it on some of these products. And the reason was they were hooking kernel tables, and sometimes they messed it up.
Yeah.
And it's,
I wasn't in IT or anything like that years ago, and I remember how often my computer crashed all the time. It was like the blue screen all the time, and then at some point it stopped being the blue screen.
It was probably around SP2.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at Windows XP, if we're looking at what protections were put in place, it used to be pre-SP2 on XP that any application could access any region of memory anywhere else in memory. So you had a lot of things like video game trainers that could actually hook right into another process's memory and start changing it. They could mess with the kernel. SP2, they started putting in protections to try to shut that down. When Vista came out, Microsoft was shutting it down completely. And like what Joff just talked about is that compromise, right? So you probably did notice things getting more stable and more secure. But now, kind of like an open question, I'd love to get people on Discord, their opinion on this too. Do you think that this is going to push Microsoft to shut this down even further?
I have, my hot take is that this is definitely going to start a conversation. Microsoft, Microsoft does not like me, so I'm going to try to be as political as I can be, but they have their own.
That's what we do here, right? So,
but they have their own product in the space, and EDR, and it doesn't really, like what Joff described, because they built the OS, they have their own ability to kind of build their own kind of methods inside there to get the same level of telemetry from the kernel without having to hook it. So they are,
ahead of the game, kind of.
They are, and they're competing with a market space here. I think this gives them enough fire to kind of say, maybe we need to revamp this policy and slowly push people out. I mean, I wouldn't see that happen because I wouldn't be surprised, because all of a sudden their product's going to start looking a lot more interesting and a lot more accurate.
Or do you think that they're going to do something like, if you're Crowdstrike or another vendor, you're going to have to hook into AMSI? And it's like, this is what you have to look into.
No, I'd like to see what I would like to see. And if I were at Microsoft right now, I would be advocating for this. I would like to see a kernel API developed that had a series of driver integrity checks built into it for every driver load, kind of like live dynamic QAing as the system booted.
Dude, but that is definitely going to be a performance hit, right?
And no one's going to want that.
But only on boot. If they could pull it off, that the integrity checks were only on boot.
There's a chance for the system to recover.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
But that's what I think is kind of a responsible middle ground here, to maintain the telemetry that the vendors need, but also introduce additional safeguards in the driver load process, so that potentially these things would not happen, right?
That's interesting. Yes, Jason.
You're muted,
you're
Jason.
You're mute, but I'm glad you raised your hand.
Why does Restream work, YouTube work, Discord work, and all these other things work right now?
Linux.
Yeah.
Linux.
Well, or any Unix-based operating system.
Yeah, just be glad that this didn't bring down all the Linux servers. It'd be a very different day.
Let's answer that question a little bit different, right? If we're looking at CrowdStrike Falcon, the vast majority, like overwhelming majority of Falcon instances are endpoints, like people sitting down working at their computers. When you're looking at a lot of server infrastructure that's actually running the internet, right? A lot of that is running on Linux. And if it is running Windows, a lot of that server infrastructure, which we don't see as much for like these types of services, it isn't going to be running CrowdStrike in those critical services that are out there. So that's generally why we're not seeing things go down at that level. Now, what's going on with the FAA and everything else, my guess is that the core infrastructure for banking, the core infrastructure for airlines, the core infrastructure for a lot of things is just fine. But the systems that the people use to run those apps, those critical services every day, are down. So if the people can't monitor, if the people can't maintain, if the people can't hook into those things, then you've got to stop airplanes. Then you've got to stop financial transactions. Then you've got to stop these things from progressing. So yes, there are absolutely servers that are Windows servers that are running CrowdStrike. That is, in fact, a thing. But in our experience in testing, it is exceedingly rare for a very high, like high fidelity, high availability, high bandwidth service to be running on a Windows system with Falcon on it.
And by the way, Microsoft, if you listen to my idea, you can write me a large check. I will happily accept that.
Oh, somebody just said, so should I reboot my computer 15 times? I'm seeing that. Seeing people that have gotten up to 20 and it hasn't worked. So you can do it if you're really desperate. The other thing that I want to talk about, I want to take a pivot from what's going on here from a technical under the hood perspective. And let's take a step out. You're now an enterprise, you're an analyst, you're a CISO. Okay, this is great. How it actually impacted the kernel, where the antivirus hooks into the kernel, that's all fine, that's all good. How do I recover? And right now there is, I'm going to tell you right out the gate that recovery is bleak. So right now the recovery officially from CrowdStrike is you have to physically log into a workstation as administrator, which I'm going to come back to here in just a couple of seconds. You have to boot the system into safe mode. Then you have to delete a file and reboot it, and it will come back. That is like 4 or 5 sentences. That sounds easy. Here's the instructions. Boot into safe mode, navigate to the driver's CrowdStrike directory, locate the sys files, delete it, reboot it, and then you're back. So you're seeing on Reddit and you're seeing on some people in Twitter where they're talking about it in terms of they have 100,000 nodes. And best case scenario, this takes 5 minutes per node to do. That is a ridiculous amount of time to be able to go through and reboot all of those systems manually. Jason, you had a question.
Does this include people that work from home?
Yes, it would include people that work from home. Oh. So worst case scenario for desktop support teams is they're sending instructions to people on how to move their computer into safe boot
Or
and
they're
do this
just sending
manually.
out new laptops.
Yeah, Jason.
But if you can't use your computer to get that information, then how are you getting the information to fix the computer?
There we go. Circular firing
Mhm.
squad. And by the way, Jason, it gets worse because a lot of organizations have been told to put hard drive encryption on their computer system, and using like BitLocker or something like that. You can't even boot it.
Yeah, these kinds of massive problems that, was a totally different problem back in the day. But I remember when the seed files were stolen for RSA.
RSA, that's right.
And, I worked for a large company at the time, and we had 150,000 employees that needed new RSA tokens. So,
And remember, RSA didn't replace those tokens for a bunch of their customers. They did
Yeah.
for you because you were out at the shipyard and it was DoD.
yeah,
So
but
that's,
scale.
that sucks.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, can you share the thing I just shot you about bypassing Bitdefender? BitLocker. So BitLocker, this is a post by, Syndicalist, that you can cycle through BIOS till you get a recovery screen. Navigate to troubleshoot advanced option startup setting, restart, skip the BitLocker first and second attempt. Navigate back to troubleshoot advanced options, command prompt, BC edit, set default, minimal safe boot. This I have seen pop up in 4 or 5 different places. I've seen it on Reddit. I've seen it on Twitter. I've even seen it on our Discord server. And I am seeing people to get around BitLocker. Sorry, I refer to it as Bitdefender. I'm seeing people that have tried to bypass BitLocker that this works. This is anecdotal. You can try to do it as a desperate measures, especially if you have a critical system that has, absolutely like the recovery keys. You need to get access to this computer system. But this thing terrifies me because this isn't even 5 minutes to do. This could take a half an hour to 45 minutes to do.
Yeah, key escrow for the win, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to bring in Patterson and Derek a little bit more on this. So we're saying you got to sit down and you got to log into all your Windows computer systems, guys. If you go into safe mode, right? You don't need to have an administrator password for safe mode on some systems, or can you kind of walk through what is the logic of that? What if you're using LAPS for administrator, like password randomization in your environment? It's not an issue of just an admin sitting down. Like, what are some recommended kind of approaches for trying to handle this? If you're seriously a help desk desktop administrator, you're staring down this. What are some pitfalls? What are some things that you got to start figuring out right now?
Oh Lord, I've been so far removed from break fix stuff. Like I honestly don't know the answer to the question of does safe mode still require an administrator path. I would say no based on experience, but I mean if it were me and I was an enterprise and I was dealing with, because this is an incident, right? This is basically a denial of service. I would say I'd probably be sending out new equipment and having it cross ship. I know it's expensive, but I just don't know how you're going to get remote workers to successfully. You'd spend more money on the phone with folks, I think, trying to figure it out. And then, I've seen people saying in chat, I've been trying to, read the fire hose for the folks that are like, is Crowdstrike going to be financially responsible? I'm sure in their end user license agreement that we don't take responsibility for outage kind of language, right?
Yeah, I am equally sure that there's going to be judges that are going to throw that shit right out the window.
But I mean, as far as like retaining customers, yeah.
So I want to continue to talk about recovery. We'll talk about the financial impact, especially to CrowdStrike here in a second. Go ahead.
No, just those manual instructions are really untenable for anyone who has remote workforce stuff.
Yeah, we've got people freaking out. They're like, "Excuse me, what?" So you completely can bypass BitLocker using these techniques? Apparently, someone was sitting on a 0-day for BitLocker, and today's their day to shine. Maybe, I don't know. I would like to get some more confirmation as to whether or not this actually works. So some other solutions, kind of kicking this out there. If you're not using hard drive encryption, you can always have a Linux system on an ISO that runs some scripts to automatically mount the hard drive and delete these files. That is one. It's just a USB drive. But once again, if you're dealing with remote workers, you're going to ship them USB drives and it's going to get there on Monday or Tuesday. And then it's going to get scary. The other one that I've seen bantered about is Pixie Boot. But Derek and I were talking about this morning.
But even so, you got to be on the same LAN, right? I mean,
You got to be
remote
on the same
workers.
LAN.
Yeah,
It's not going to work for remote workers. Pixie Boot,
No, it's not. Absolutely.
Pixie Boot at scale is difficult. Yeah, and it just
without being able to VPN in, you're not going to be able to Pixie Boot. You're not going to put that on the internet.
I think the biggest challenge here is the BitLocker challenge, right? Because if you have to go recovery keys before you go safe mode. I mean, I know the hack's out there, but who knows if it's going to work. But
like this, somebody said it doesn't bypass BitLocker. It just boots normally with the trusted platform module to unlock the drive. You still need to have the admin password.
Yeah,
but still kind of does. I don't know. So.
Can I just...
Linux Girl asked, what is Pixie Boot? So Pixie Boot is where instead of your computer starting its operating system from the hard drive, it goes on the network through a broadcast protocol, and it downloads an image of an operating system to load from the network rather than the hard drive itself.
Typically over TFTP.
Yeah, TFTP is very common. And basically what happens there is you put an option in your DHCP server, which points at the network server that supplies the operating system image.
Daniel just said we need to Pixie Boot on content delivery networks. I'm like, there's nothing. There's nothing said about that makes me feel warm and fuzzy.
By the way, the acronym is PXE, even though we all say Pixie, but
it just sounds cooler, right, Joff?
It does sound cooler.
I feel like it does sound cooler.
I feel like Patterson's quietly in the background finding a fix for this, and then at the very end, he's like, "All right, so here's how."
Here it is. He's the ninja that's quiet in the back of the fight. He's jumping in. What do you got, Patterson?
I'm bordering on Captain Obvious, but I can't help myself in that as an incident responder, this is the crap we've been warning you about. And I just want to say, please forgive me. Never let a good crisis go to waste. All of the things that we're wrestling with, out-of-band comms, prioritization of business critical resources, backups, resilience. This may be the wrong time, but that's just top of mind for me to walk out the other side of this as an incredible learning opportunity to redefine and/or define ways that you're going to confront these kinds of issues, because this is denial of service at scale. And again, it's like the world's greatest tabletop exercise.
It's I put out this morning Saudi Aramco, right? I mean,
oh my gosh, it's like everyone gets to play Saudi Aramco. I put it out this morning. On the bright side, lots of companies get to live fire ransomware recovery test this morning. Because if you're worried about ransomware, this is the same. Just like Patterson said, these are the same steps. If you can do this well, you're doing awesome. Keep going. But I'm guessing a lot of organizations can't do this well. And unfortunately, there's no amount of money that you can pay somebody that they will give you, you pay them in Bitcoin and they give you a recovery key that recovers your ops. There is no really cool reset button with the ransomware group where they're like, give us $1 million and you get everything back. That doesn't exist today.
Yeah, watch out for the phishing tactics that are going to be flowing.
Talk about the
Exactly.
phishing tactics a little bit. Before John left, he showed a bunch of domains that were registered within the last 24 hours. And here's some of them: CrowdstrikeBlueScreen.com, CrowdstrikeZeroDay.com, CrowdstrikeBSOD.com, CrowdstrikeDoomsday.com, CrowdstrikeFix.com, CrowdstrikeDown.site, CrowdstrikeToken.com. So it's brace yourselves. You think this is bad. The attackers are going to take advantage of this. This is coming right now. So Derek, you were talking about that with me on the phone. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this?
I mean, we just saw this. Oh gosh, I just read about this yesterday on another. I can't remember the software package. We actually had a SOC customer that fell for something similar, where you Google the problem and it's like, here's the solution to the problem. So you couple either phishing or social or search engine optimization, and you get the fix or the update, and it's not the fix or the update, right?
At all.
It's backdoored. So that's what I worry about. Those are just some of the IOCs that are known now, and I imagine there'll be more to come.
So from a defense perspective, one of the things you might want to do with your DNS security provider is basically looking at the age of domains. What is the age of the domain? I mean, you should be, and this goes back to what Patterson said. This is all shit you should have been doing 2 weeks ago, right? Like this isn't like, oh God, no, we never saw this coming.
Take
And I
advantage
also
of the
feel bad. This
yeah,
is something that really hurts me is like the people that are listening to this webcast and are lighting up Discord, and I cannot keep up with what's going on
No, me
Discord
either.
right now. They're not the ones that worry me the most. The ones that worry me the most are the ones that logged into CNN, Drudge Report, whatever, and they're like, good God, what happened? What is this? And they're starting from ground zero right now. That is what really scares me.
So I believe we're going to have a new backdoors and breaches inject card.
We do.
I think we are.
I wonder what the card is going to be.
We did a tabletop yesterday, and we actually pulled the EDR, endpoint security, and then they rolled a failure, and everyone in the audience was incredulous. Our EDR always works. I'm like,
no, really?
I'm
You could get back to him, and you could be like,
me,
see?
sometimes things don't go as planned. Like,
Yeah.
What timing is that?
So somebody actually, I just caught something going by. So updates are bad, right? I mean, these are the kinds of things that make organizations think, well, now we're not going to update because look what happened. And that's not the right answer either.
So the new backdoors and breaches cards, I think it needs to be named Colonel Driver Fubard. That's what we need.
So at the first Crowdstrike deployment I ever did a long time ago, we had issues with basically denial of service through oversaturation of internet connectivity based on updates. And then you could group your updates thereafter. You could actually manage distribution of Crowdstrike updates to endpoints based on grouping. Can you not do that anymore? Can you exert some manual control to say test group?
Somebody posted a minute ago, and I just caught it, and I'm not sure if it's true that even if you were trying to stay behind, like that, this basically you got this update either way, and that's one thing I never really agreed with in the certainly for personal users when Windows did it, but I never really agreed with forcing updates on organizations, and I know there's ways around it for sure, but the automatic update thing. It needs to be an option. You shouldn't just auto update.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to disagree. This is bad, no question. But God damn it, if it takes us back 10 years with auto updates,
that's what's going to happen.
We can't have that. Right?
I don't disagree, but
it used to be. I used to teach way back in mid 2000s. It was like you should always test and validate your updates for a couple of weeks before you roll it out to production. And it's like we ain't got time for that.
But I stopped saying that and more of said, and it does apply to this too. Just get good at fixing it when it breaks, right? So immediately deploy it to like your IT team that would be responsible for fixing it, right?
What if
you get to auto
roll out 3 EDRs? You do one Crowdstrike and Huntress, and then at least only 1/3 of your environment will be
the
cratered.
systems. Yeah. Well, that's an idea.
Sense in depth, not really.
We joke about that, dude. We joke about that, but I guarantee. Is that a bad idea today to basically say that we have multiple offices? We're going to use different EDRs to make sure that we don't go down 100%.
We used to recommend doing bifurcation of endpoint security on workstations versus servers, partially for that reason. Not a terrible idea for sure.
And the article I was trying to remember during my class, but I remember Dan Gear and Bruce Schneier, the monoculture paper, where they were talking about the dangers of monocultures. Like we're still there, right? That is absolutely a problem that exists, but I just don't know where the hell this goes. I don't think it goes anywhere good. Like I think that you're going to have CEOs who are going to be like, rip and replace CrowdStrike now.
Oh, yeah. And
CrowdStrike, just to be honest, Matt, I want to get your take. Joff, I want to get your take. They aren't a garbage EDR, right? Like they're not bottom feeders, right? So we might be seeing one of the better EDRs in the market get completely blown out of the water because of one stupid CI/CD mistake. Yeah. And I'm not, dude, CrowdStrike doesn't pay me, right? I get no money from them. In fact, we have a love-hate relationship with CrowdStrike. We absolutely do.
They love to hate us.
They love to hate us. They keep shutting down our effing licenses when we're researching. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going to throw this out there, everybody. God damn it, they're a pain in the ass. That's a good thing. We're a pen testing company, right? So, you want it to be a pain in our ass. And
I feel like if they handle it in a way, like if I was the CEO and they handle it in a way where, they take ownership and try and make it as right as possible. I don't know that I would say, all right, because this could happen to any product.
Yes, that's the key. If you think you're going to move off to another vendor and they're never going to have this, I've got this great post that I saw today where they went through and they listed out all of the other vendors that have had EDR vendors that have had the same type of issue. They just aren't as big. Ryan, could we kick this up? Real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not EDR vendors as well, right?
No, it's not.
I think that this could happen to any enterprise class software.
Well, any product at all that involves itself with the kernel, which is a lot.
And I've seen thousands of networks since I've been at Black Hills, like both large and small. And if you think the really large shops aren't held together with like duct tape and popsicle sticks behind the scenes, you're wrong, right? They are. And so I just imagine that this happened because a file didn't transfer right. Nobody paid attention, right?
Yeah. So, so the tweet talks about blue screen of death in, what is this? Cortex XDR. Another one in Kaspersky. Another one in Symantec endpoint protection. Another one in Sophos net filter. So, God damn it, CrowdStrike. You're putting me into a situation where I have to defend you. I did not want to be at this point today. So,
there was one thing I wanted to jump into. I know going back a bit. A lot of EDR vendors have the ability with their updates to actually do staggered updates where you can do groupings of updates or, push live to a big group, or you can actually set it so that way, depending on the settings, you can have a small subsection get the latest bleeding edge updates and then your core group. So like when to say this whole thing about like people are going to stop doing updates, I think the only thing people that benefit from that are threat actors when you do that. And I want to stress that there are some settings and controls like pre-prod that can deploy this. I think this is going to definitely have a bigger conversation. How is your update policy set up? We, for a lot of time in security, focus in on, how you're rolling out these updates, how are they deployed, how they're being tuned. We focus a lot about that, but no one really focuses on update tests. And I think this is a great opportunity to look at these products, because I know a lot of EDRs across the space have the ability to do like 2 staggered behind updates from the bleeding edge or the current one.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great opportunity that if you somehow were able to set your things, not always push the live update blindly and have it go to a small control test, you might be one of the few companies that are not having this issue today.
Yeah. Now, the big question that I'm getting from my family is like, when do we buy on the dip? I honestly, this is, I hope I'm wrong, but I think this is like CrowdStrike's going to go down. It's not going to go out of business completely, but it's going to go down. Like there is CEOs having very blunt conversations with their tech team, and they do not give a shit about any of the things that we just said. And they're like, we need blood. We need a head on a platter, and CrowdStrike's going to be the sacrificial lamb. I think that's going to happen. You think the dip already happened? Possibly, right? It might be. I don't know. But I would not look at this as like 2 weeks, everything's going to be okay. It might be, but this is bad, especially if it gets to the point where flights are down for like the next like week, or if it led to people dying. Like there's hospitals that went down, operating rooms that went down, dialysis machines that went down. At least that's what we're seeing, right? A lot of that shit's not confirmed, but standard outage companies can recover from. If you actually led to loss of life and you're a hospital and you got a story of another hospital that went down because of this product, right, wrong, or indifferent, small mistake, anybody can make that mistake. If you choose to keep that software in your environment and something like this happens again, the liability is not going to be on the vendor. The liability is going to be on the hospital that decided to keep that vendor that had something like this happening in the past. And once again, I don't think that's fair to CrowdStrike. I don't think it is, but there's a lot of organizations and lawyers that are looking at it through that type of lens, and they have to do something. And that's my big fear about what we're seeing this right now.
Yeah. I have a lot of empathy for the people who are going to work the CrowdStrike booth at Black Hat.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
They might even just close it down.
Yeah.
It might be entirely possible that CrowdStrike is like, This isn't worth it. Because think about all the memes and the people on Twitter. They're going to be going by and taking a picture of them flipping off the Crowdstrike booth, right? That's going to be the hot thing to do at Black Hat. I'm going to tell you right now, Crowdstrike, if you're thinking of going to Black Hat, don't.
Well, let's face it. We can, as a community, we're not always the nicest folk.
No.
Can I suggest that you prepare your speech now when somebody says you deployed EDR on my biomedical systems and risked the lives of patients? That not to minimize that concern, but I'm here to tell you for a certainty, if ransomware was detonated on your biomedical systems, it would directly impact your patients. So be prepared to have a logical conversation about the cost benefit of EDR versus exploitation versus threat actor access.
Yes.
Cannot overstress that. And a logical conversation, not an emotional conversation, about there is a risk to running EDR and it's this. There's a risk to not running EDR and it's this.
Well, and I'm also going to kind of like riff on that a little bit. If you're at CrowdStrike right now, you need to, within the next 12 hours, be saying, what are you doing moving forward that you were not doing a week ago?
Yeah.
You cannot say that an intern screwed up. You cannot say that an admin screwed up. You cannot say that somebody oopsied. You've got to say, what are we doing that's fundamentally different moving from this moment on that we were not doing last week? And I also think being very open about what happened and saying, oh, there was a problem in our CI/CD pipeline. Not good enough. Like with something like this, you're going to have to say, here's specifically where the boo-boo is. And I would recommend looking at Mandiant. And whenever they were breached, and of course that led into the whole SolarWinds thing, be as open as you possibly can. Like if you're trying to minimize this by doing obscurity, if you're going to try to minimize this with this community by trying to double speak, corporate speak, and going around it, you're effed. Not only are you effed, you deserve to be effed. If you get in front of this and you get very detailed technical explanations of where the program broke down, the CI/CD pipeline, the validation process broke down, and what you're doing to rectify that, you may survive this. I don't have a lot of hope for CrowdStrike to do that. I just seriously don't. But I think in this community, like we react better to sunshine, which is weird because we're IT geeks and sunshine makes us burn in ways and in places that are uncomfortable. But the more information that you give us on what's going on this, the more we're going to trust you moving forward. And your only marketable thing that you have at CrowdStrike right now is trust. And if you start burning that with corporate doublespeak, you're done.
Yeah. I want to, not to be shameless plugging, but I'm going to do a slight plug. Back in February, I released a blog, February 22nd, called Initial Access Operations, Part 1, and it talks about the Windows endpoint defense technology landscape. So aside from the things that I've said today and that Matt Eidelberg has said today on this newscast, it behooves us to do a little research and read up on some of these things to get educated about some of the things that are going on in the systems that we're managing every day. So I just wanted to put that out there. Go read it. And I think you'll learn a few things, and it helps reinforce some of the stuff that I said today.
All right, everybody, let's wrap it up. We've gone a little bit over. Thank you so much to those of you that joined. Thanks to John for joining. Thanks for Ryan for being here when he's sick with COVID. It's not cool that he's here. Speaking of processes that need to be fixed, we need people that can back him up. But he's so good. No, he's asleep. Don't tell him. He's getting a big head is what you're saying. He's got COVID. He's not going to remember any of this anyway. But seriously, I appreciate you guys jumping on and really the community jumping on. I think we had like 3,000 people come on, which is huge. We really appreciate all of you in the community. You blew up my Discord in ways I didn't know was possible. I couldn't keep up with you. But we appreciate all of you and good luck and God bless to every single one of you. It's going to be a rough weekend. Take care.